And good evening and welcome to the Kaufman Corner podcast. If you're catching us later in the week, remember you can always catch us live via the stream. We do it Sunday nights at 10 o'clock when everything fits. Sometimes it ends up being Monday, but usually it's Sunday nights at 10 o'clock and a lot of things to cover. We want to talk about the pitch clock, how that is changing things already in spring training baseball. Maybe get some of my impressions of spring training as I'm fresh off being in Surprise, Arizona. Then we're also going to take our stab at the 26-man roster. It's coming up right now here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
And good evening and welcome to the Kaufman Corner podcast. Back at it here live on a Sunday night. We appreciate everybody joining us in the chat room. We will get to some of the folks, some of your comments here as we progress throughout. But Rany, games, although not real games, are already being decided with the new rules. And I, for one, am giddy and excited that actually they're not afraid to make the calls that are resulting in the game being over. It's the only way you're going to speed things along.
Mm-hmm.
Have you liked what you've seen so far?
I have been, I was excited about the new rules, particularly the pitch clock, since they were announced. But my one concern with the pitch clock was that would the players accept it? Like, I was concerned that there was a chance that there would be, if not a mutiny, certainly a lot of grumbling from the existing veteran players who've been doing this for 5, 10, 15 years now, and that there would be pushback against what is really the most dramatic imposition on the flow of a game that has happened in my lifetime. And it's only been a couple days, but I think we've seen enough that I can say I am delighted at the lack of pushback from the players. I think for every player that's grumbled a little bit about the fact that they have to speed up their routine, and these are usually the most egregious offenders, the slow guys on the mound, you're seeing so many players who are in the majors, a lot of whom the newer guys who played in the minors under some version of a pitch clock over the last couple of years and has seen how it's affected the game, who are excited about it. The players themselves seem to be, on the whole, encouraging this change. And so my fear that they would have to water down the rule or, not make it so strict where it's 15 seconds and 20 seconds, or that the umpires wouldn't be empowered to call in a dramatic situation. Those fears in just 2 or 3 days have really gone down. I think this is a go. I think we're going to see the rule as it is on opening day. And I mean, you've seen the game times, averaging something like 2:35 in spring training. And yeah, it's spring training and the games are going to go faster, and that may not completely translate. But it's spring training, which means, a lot more offense. I mean, the Royals obviously playing down in Arizona, notorious for high offense games, and yet they're getting the games in 30 minutes faster. And I hear so many people saying, well, why do you want less baseball? It's not less baseball. It's less dead time. It's the same amount of baseball in a compressed amount of time. And speaking as, somebody who's got 4 kids and a full-time job and can't always stay up till 10:30 or 11 or 11:30 at night to watch the end of a game, I'm personally delighted by the idea that games will actually be frequently done by 10 p.m. So I'm very excited to see what the season brings. And I think once people get used to it, the first, I still remember an article I read in Sports Illustrated. I was 13 years old. It was a history of the shot clock in basketball. For the 35th anniversary, Sports Illustrated 1988, they did an article on the 35-second shot clock. And until then, I took for granted the flow of a basketball game, and not realizing, like, before 1953, you could literally there were NBA games that were, the final score was 13-12, and there were 2 baskets in the last 10 minutes of a game, because if you don't force teams to do something, they won't do it. And how it completely, changed the flow of a game in a positive way with really no downsides. And I really think that we could see a similar result in baseball, where by May, people are like, how did we go this long without this?
Yes.
And that's what I'm excited about.
I agree. I think we're very quick. I think the players will get used to it. In fact, I think they may even, like, the hitters that have had all this time to sit and try to psych themselves out and think about what pitch could be coming, will find that they start to get more comfortable with the fact that the game is going. There's a rhythm, and everybody's Mark Burley out there, and that's going to be a good thing for it. I agree, and so I'm really looking forward to seeing games get played in a reasonable pace, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the Red Sox and Yankees on ESPN, right? Because we know it's going to be on about like 16 times, and just those games are brutal. I mean, I never even consider watching those games because they just go on forever, and not so much these Red Sox, right, as opposed to when they had the guys that could really work the count and everything, but. It's all the other crap that went with it. Like, I don't mind a guy working the count, but, like, I don't need you messing with your gloves after every at bat and all those things. I think it'll be, it's no less baseball. It's just baseball. That's the idea behind it. So I'm with you. I think we're off to a good start, and I think a lot of the other ones, and I think we'll, mound visits and all those kind of things, we're going to start going. You know what? Like, we can play without this. Like, get up there and play the game. And I think once they see how well this does, I'm hoping that they'll be empowered to do even more, but we'll see where it goes from here. You got any impressions from spring? Anything you want to discuss? I will tell you, I enjoyed everybody that I spoke to down there. Didn't come across anybody. Matt Quatrero's kind of a different cat. Paul Hoover, the bench coach, I asked him, I said, tell me one thing about Matt Quatrero we don't know. And he said, well, shame on you if you haven't figured this out already, but he's really boring. And I thought that was kind of interesting. That's one of his own guys there that said that. I do think that he's not like any other manager I've ever been around. Like he doesn't. I don't think he likes the media. Like Ned Yost can claim he didn't like all the media sessions and talking to the media. I think he loved it. I think he loved being the center of attention. I think he loved being the guy that you had to wait on and the guy to tell you, no, well, of course. He loved every Quatrero doesn't, right? That's not Matt Quatrero. And I get a sense that I wonder if that part of the job will really wear on him. That's one thing that jumped out at me.
That is an interesting observation. That's sort of what kind of what I got from listening to him. You interview him on your radio show. That I think he's still kind of feeling his way towards handling being the guy, being manager. Not from the standpoint of the clubhouse. I don't think there'll be an issue necessarily there. I think that he's made a good first impression with the players, and I think handling the people who are your charges, your employees, the guys who look up to you, is very different than handling people who work for an outside organization that you have no control over. But that's a big part of the job, and he has to learn how to do it. And I'm certainly not going to judge a guy based on the first week of spring training, but it may be where he's not good at it at the beginning of the year, and he has to learn to adjust. But yeah, it is a big part of the job. He doesn't have to be interesting, like you said. He can be boring, but he has to be, forthright. He has to avoid the temptation to get ornery when things are printed that he doesn't agree with or there's criticism. That is a part of the job, and God only knows. You take over the Kansas City Royals, losers of 95 games, like 4 of the last 6 years. There's probably going to be some criticism, regardless of how well you do. The team isn't very good yet. So that is definitely one of the things I will be watching early in the year is how does he handle, gentle criticism, questioning, not even criticism, but like, there are people asking why you're doing the things you are. He could end up actually being very good at that because I do think there's a reason for everything that the Royals are doing, which, seems kind of common sense, but that wasn't always the case the last few years. And I'm excited to see the thought process and try and follow along.
Yeah.
And if he's open about that, even if we don't necessarily agree with what that thought process is, the fact that there is one is at this point, that's a step forward. So, this he's entering a better situation with the media than maybe he realizes, but I hope that he makes that adjustment and understands that that's just a part of the job he's going to have to accept.
Yeah, I also like that. I felt like every coach I talked to, there was a lot of confidence, and then not like spring, breathe, hope springs eternal. Not that it wasn't hope; it was confidence, and not confidence that they're going to go out and win 100 games, not confidence that they're going to be a contender right away, but just they know what they're doing. I really felt like, I almost feel like your guy Cal Eldred was impersonating a pitching coach that he liked in the past, right? Like, but right, and Sweeney's the greenest of the bunch. I mean, he is just bubbling with excitement and
Mhm.
energy and wanting to go help things and create his own. What did he call it? His own pitching? Um, I don't know, cradle. Whatever it was, but how excited he was. But Paul Hoover is cool and laid back and knows what he's doing on the catching side and is the bench coach, and all of them throughout the organization. I was just real impressed with what they're doing and how they're going about things. Again, I will say this: I'll reserve judgment until we get like this time, really opening day next year. Because you got to, they're gonna have to cycle through all the guys. The roster hasn't gone through all the transformations that's going to go through. But I really did. I was really impressed and really liked what I heard to get things started. So I think that was a good sign. And I will say this: we had this question from Terry. Any insight on Bally Sports? I think it'll be gone on March 16th. I will say just real quickly that John Sherman, we had a chance to talk to him and get some questions with him. I was hoping to get him one-on-one. That hasn't materialized yet. Even though I was told it would at one point, it has not yet. But he said, "Listen, I think you all know, and if we all knew, then we all knew except for this guy. They missed an interest payment on February 15th, and I don't think everybody knew. I think it was his way of putting the information out there. Like it had been put out there somewhere, but it wasn't necessarily common knowledge." And they had missed an interest payment on February 15th. He said, so they have 30 days to fix that. And he said, so, March 15th is a day to circle on your calendars. He was pretty much saying March 15th, like circle that, here it comes.
Okay.
So I think that is of note. He likewise did not seem panicked in any way, shape, or form about the revenue loss. He said, would we like to have all the payments coming in? Of course we would. He said, but I think in the long run, this is going to be a good move for baseball. And I think it's going to get us to where we were going to go anyway, quicker. And let's keep in mind, NHL, NBA, they're in this boat as well with this. And now it's not just Bally's. Other, regional sports networks are talking about filing for bankruptcy. So, this is where it's going to go. They got to get there. They got to figure it out. And I think they will. But March 15th, I think, is your next date to circle on your calendar when it comes to that. But overall, I was very impressed with what's going on down there. And, I feel like, this is a quality coaching staff that is about coaching and making players better, more so than like trying to bend them into what it is they think they need to be. I don't know. It had a different vibe and feel, and maybe it's just the pressure that's been relieved from 3 years of Mike Matheny. I think Quatrero is much more laid back, and I think Matheny was starting to wear people out.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, it is, I don't want to rehash the point we made last week, but, with every Aaron Rodgers column about the pitchers, it brings up the question once again: what the hell were the Royals doing with their pitchers the last couple of years? Because what the Royals are doing now is it doesn't seem they're not reinventing the wheel; they're just taking the wheel from Tampa and Cleveland and LA and a dozen other places around baseball, and it's like moving the Royals forward like a century. And they have the raid the zone. You saw that slogan down in spring training, and they're wearing the shirts. And we had briefly, I think, discussed this last week. This notion that the Rays have their pitchers set up their catchers, set up their gloves right in the middle of the zone and stop trying to get the pitchers to throw to a corner because that leads to too many walks. And you trust that the pitcher's natural movement, certainly on an 0-0 count, before you're ahead in the count, that you'll take the chance of throwing a fat pitch right down the middle in order to increase your first pitch strike rate. And the Royals were dead last in baseball by a wide margin in the fewest first pitch strikes last year. This is something that J.J. Cooper over at Baseball America discussed, and Sam McDowell actually wrote a column for the Kansas City Star this week that dove into this exact subject, and J.J. was exactly right. The Royals are very much emphasizing this. It's such a simple thing, and yet it's actually could lead to a dramatic change in the way that these guys pitch and how many strikes they throw. Will it work? I don't know. But the fact that they are setting that as a benchmark, like the Royals themselves, Quintero and Brian Sweeney were talking about how many walks the Royals were giving up in each game. I just think that's really an interesting thing to follow, because they are saying this is the benchmark that we're holding our pitchers to, is how many strikes they throw. Not even necessarily about quality, but just strikes and no walks. And that is something that we'll see hopefully results right away.
It's painfully simple. You have natural movement, so don't try to start on the corner, because if you have a pitch that breaks outside and you already start outside, you're more likely to get it. The catching it, one of the framing things is move the catcher up so that the ball doesn't have as, far to travel and tail away. These seem like painfully simple things. Painfully simple things.
It's painfully simple, but it means it's low-hanging fruit. And
Yes.
The first thing you do when you come in to try and improve an organization, whether you're, a baseball manager or I suppose, a private equity investor, is you go after the low-hanging fruit. Fix the easy things to fix right away, and then work your way up the tree.
Yeah,
and so I'm glad that they are going after the low-hanging fruit first. That's what you should do. Don't make things too complicated.
All right, let's start breaking down the roster. We have compiled what we think is our 26-man roster for the Kansas City Royals. I don't know that mine's really any different. We talked about all right, well, what are we going to do? Are we going to do what we think they're going to do, or are we going to do what we would do? I don't know that I have a whole lot of differences between the two on my end. I'm all ears for you. Where do you want to start? You want to start behind the plate? Do you want to start on the mound? Where do you want to go?
Well, the first thing I want to say is I just want to mention how this was a surprisingly difficult exercise, in large part because figuring out the split between pitchers and hitters was trickier than I expected. And that's what I would start with, is how many pitchers, how many hitters they're going to carry. With the 26, I believe the rule right now is limits teams to 13. That I think it's going to go to 12 eventually, but you can carry up to 13. I think carrying 13 pitchers and 13 hitters is silly. There's no reason not to carry an extra hitter. You can shuffle pitchers back and forth to AAA so often that you can, even if you only have 12 pitchers, that's one thing. That's still 7 relievers, but you functionally can work with 8 or 9 if you're moving pitchers up and down the AAA shuttle, which is something that Tampa Bay does. And Quintero is very familiar with essentially using that shuttle as a way to extend your roster to 27, 28 guys and have an extra hitter or 2 on the bench. But what struck me about the Royals 40-man roster, do you know how many hitters are on the 40-man roster right now?
Well, I can quickly tell you. Not many. I mean, it's dominated by pitching.
All right. Well, that's the thing. There are 16 hitters on the entire 40-man roster. Now, one of those is Diego Hernandez, who sadly hurt his shoulder diving for a ball a couple of days ago and is out. Hopefully, he'll be back by June. Hopefully, he won't miss more than half the season. And we've talked about him before. We like him, and I wish him a speedy recovery, because I do think he has. In 2 years, he might be a starting center fielder on this team. But he's one of those guys. He's not going to be on the active roster. Michael Garcia is one of those guys. He's probably, they're trying him out at third base, and he's one of those guys where if somebody in spring training is going to have a monster spring, it's going to make the roster. Surprises. Could it be Michael Garcia? Maybe. I don't think it will be, though. Drew Waters is one of those guys. He's got a strained oblique. He's probably not going to be on the opening day roster. So right there, you're down to 13 guys. And then, I'm going to add Franmil Reyes. He's a non-roster invitee. I don't know if you have him on your active roster, but one of the reasons why I think he's going to make the team is they don't have enough hitters to flesh out a roster. So, and that is a problem. Like, you need to have, uh, at least 15 guys in your organization who are major league ready hitters in order to get through a season when you're going to have at least 13 and hopefully 14 guys on the active, 14 hitters on the active roster. So the Royals are missing a couple of hitters from their 40-man roster. And this is one of the things about modern baseball drives me crazy is there's just so many one-inning guys on your 40-man that it just crowds out the space for good hitters. So that made it a little more tricky. And I think I had no choice but to end up with a 13-13 split. I don't know. Did you?
13-13.
You have a 13-13. Yeah. I mean, I think this is one of those areas where I would do it differently, but I don't know where they find even a 14th hitter at the moment.
I can throw you a dart, but I don't think it's going to happen. And I don't know that there's, maybe in the pitching department, there's some battles like we've talked about where it is, but for the reason you said for the quantity, I don't really see where there's a whole lot of, decisions that are going to happen here. I think I thought the hitting was pretty easy to come up with. Did you?
Pretty much, yeah. Once you get past that point, so let's start there. So
Okay.
we might have one or two. There's a couple of spots where I'm not. It's going to come down to what happens in spring training. But let's start there. So so behind the plate, I have obviously Salvi, and then I have MJ Melendez listed back there. The guy I have on the bubble is Freddie Fermin. I don't know if he because there are so short of hitters, he is a guy who I think is on the bubble to make this team if they end up moving Melendez, making him more of the everyday left fielder this spring.
I have him making the team.
Okay.
I have him as the backup catcher, and I have Melendez in the outfield, but a third catcher. But I think the receiving part of it is going to be really important. And I don't know how much Salvador Perez and MJ Melendez are going to be able to improve. I think they're going to want a guy that can really flat out catch. And so I think he makes it. So I've got two catchers and Melendez because I think at some point you've got to, maybe this will tip their hand as to where they're going. If they don't have Fermin, it's a sign that they're looking to get Melendez behind the dish as fast as possible. And maybe they'll trade Salvador Perez. But I have them keeping Fermin because I'm assuming that the catching part of the equation is going to be important, and Salvi's going to get a lot of DH time.
Yeah, I do. I have Fermin on my roster at the end. He was the last guy on the bubble, but yes, I agree.
All right. So Salvador Perez, Fermin, we both have Melendez. Where do you want to go next? First?
Yeah, let's go around the infield here.
Okay. Vinny is there, right?
Vinny at first.
Do you have Prado making the team?
At the moment, no.
Yeah.
Like Fermin is the guy, and I think he went back to Omaha to end the last season and wasn't great in Omaha in September. And they have so many guys that they need to play at DH and in the outfield. I don't know where Prado plays. I think they would love to see him work on getting that strikeout rate down in AAA. So I could be wrong. If he could be a monster this spring, but right now I have Nick Prado going to Omaha.
Yeah, I have Prado in Omaha looking to get off to a good start. And a guy that could figure into the mix very quickly as well. He's one of the guys that should be quick to put some pressure on him to get somebody else up there. Michael Morrissey's at second for me. Michael Massey's at second for me.
Mm-hmm. Yep, same here.
Third base, Hunter Dozier. Like it or not, that's where he's going to be.
Yes, if we're talking about what the roster will be, it's going to be Hunter Dozier at third base. If we're talking about what I would do, I don't think I'd have Hunter Dozier on the roster, period, but that's a separate question.
I would, once you've gotten to this point and he went to spring training with you, I would, and I'm hoping he can hit some home runs and we can trade him for something. That's the spot that I would be in right now. And then Bobby Witt Jr. is at shortstop.
Mm-hmm. And then do you have, let's go around the outfield and then we'll do utility guys, bench players. Okay. So in the outfield, I currently so Melendez is probably the starter and left, but I also have Edward Olivares, whether you put him at left field or at DH. And then I've the one thing I'm fairly sure of is Kyle Isbell in center because the Joe Waters injury, that just makes that, it's unfortunate. Hopefully Waters will actually be back fairly soon. He might just miss a few weeks, but I think it's a great opportunity to let Kyle Isbell play every day, see if he can hit even a little bit. And then if his defense is just as good as it's been in the past, then you might have something there. And then I have Franmil Reyes, whether he's in right field or DH. Like, him or Oliveris, but Isabel's going to have to run down a lot of fly balls because right now the corner outfielders, whoever they are not known for their range.
Yeah, no, I've got Reyes at DH, Melendez in left, Isbell in center, Oliveris in right. And then we can talk about who we got in the backup side. I do think it'll be interesting when Drew Waters comes back. If everybody's going, who he pushes out. I think that is something to see, but I also don't expect him to be back until May. Yeah. I think you're looking at they're going to go ahead and take advantage of 30 days down in the minor leagues.
Exactly. I think he'll be playing in Omaha in April, but that's the thing. If there's a roster crunch, that's the easy thing to do. Let him, and he's spent 2 months in AAA in the Royals organization. I think there's plenty of things they can still have him work on down there.
Yeah. All right. So now, do you want to go to your pitching staff, or you want to go to the?
Let's do the bench players. Yep. So so we've mentioned. I think we basically mentioned 9 guys plus my 9 starters, and then for me, to get to 13, you need 3 bench guys. Nicky Lopez obviously is your going to do everything short infielder, and then I have Nate Eaton making the roster because he can play everywhere in the outfield. He's great defensively. He's played some third base, and I'm hoping that they will at least give him some opportunities to play there and see if he can handle the position. And precisely because he's not like an elite prospect, his upside isn't huge. I don't think they see him as like potentially benefiting from more seasoning in AAA. Like he's kind of a finished product. I don't think he's going to be hurt by starting his career as a bench player now. Like they see him as a super utility guy anyway. So there's no downside to not having him play every day right now.
So that's
2.
Yeah. The second one, and just to be, you're talking about Eaton.
So yeah, Lopez and Eaton.
Okay.
And then the last spot on the roster, unless I'm forgetting somebody, which is possible, but I have Semed Taylor making this roster as sort of, he's a second baseman who can also play the outfield. He's got speed. And they clearly liked him from the trade that they got him from Whit Merrifield last year. I'm not punting on this spot. I could, because I'm really not sure. This is a spot where if Michael Garcia gets has a great spring trade, he could make the team. But right now, that's what I'm saying. Even getting to 13 is hard. They have to get to 13. I think the rules mandate they get to 13. But yeah, that's that. I think he's got a shot to make the team.
I think I think he comes up short. I think they want him to play every day, and so he goes down to the minor leagues. I've got Lopez and Eaton, and I've got, take your pick out of Beatty or Duffy. One of those guys was brought in to finish off this roster,
or Camargo. That would be the other guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I've got Matt Beatty just because of the position flexibility. I have no commitment to that decision whatsoever, but I do think there's going to be a veteran bat that's been around, been there and done that, and they'll start with the young guys down in the minor leagues. That's my
that's a fair spot. Ultimately, it's going to be the last spot on the roster. It could be anybody. I actually, if I had to bet on it, I would say it wouldn't be Semed Taylor. There's like 7 different guys it could be.
I think he'd be the perfect guy if he hits. And I also just think that this is it's a different regime. It's one that doesn't just, look at one spring training set of numbers and go, okay, you're good. I mean, I think they're much more likely to be like, the most useless statistics in baseball are spring training numbers, and so they're going to go.
Well, all you need to know about spring training, I do want to remind everybody. I know people got extremely excited. Tyler Tolbert had the game of his life. Was it yesterday or the day before? 2 sensational catches in center field, which I think is interesting only because Tyler Tolbert, if you're not familiar with him, this is the latest guy off the Gerard Dyson Terrence Gore assembly line. The guy with 80 speed, 60 stolen bases, and 0 caught stealings last year in the minor leagues, which I don't believe I have ever seen somebody with 100% and at least 50 steals. But he's always been a shortstop in the minors. He's played a little bit of outfield. They've certainly would talk about it, but seeing him out there and then seeing him make 2 great catches in one game, that I think is interesting. But of course, the highlight was he had a 3-run bomb. That's when you know you're playing in Arizona in spring training. Tyler Tolbert hitting home runs. let's remember when you see Hunter Dozier hitting bombs or whatever. Just remember Tyler Tolbert can hit home runs in Arizona in March. And that's not what his game is. So please, if there's one thing to remember from listening to our podcast, ignore spring training numbers. They don't mean pretty much anything.
And I do want to, though, say that I think Franmil Reyes is more than just a guy. Like, I think he's on the roster. When they got a hold of him, they're like, that's a real source of power. And he's had 230 home run seasons in his career. He's 27 years old, not 37 years old. I think they've got bigger plans for him than I think most people in Kansas City realize. Not that anybody said anything. You look at this roster and like you said, it's tough to fill the spots without him, and so I think he has a role for this
Yeah,
team, and
I agree.
Be a big one.
And I mean, to be clear, I'm not a big fan of him as a player. Like, I actually think it's unlikely he's going to be an above average player for the Royals. But one of the most important assets a bad team has is playing time, right? You have playing time to dole out. Give it to players who might be, might be washed up, even though he's only 27 years old. He's coming off the worst season of his career. His OPS plus last year was 81. But before that, the lowest OPS in the 4 years before that was a 112. Right. So he might be washed up, but you know what? It's worth giving him a couple hundred at bats to find out. Because, even though he's a low on base guy, he's a career 470 slug. And he's, like you said, 27. Usually you get a guy like this for 29 or 30. There's a big difference between being 27 and being 30.
Yeah. Agreed.
So, and again, you're a bad team without a lot of great options there right now. In a year, maybe Tyler Gentry will be ready. Maybe Gavin Cross will be ready in a year.
Yeah.
But
for sure,
this is the year to find out. So I think it's a useful pickup, and I think you're right. I think they want to see what he has to do.
And if he gets off to a hot start, it's an easy trade piece as well. And I think you can look at that with just about anybody on this roster right now. By the way, we're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the entire KC metro area. Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. They've been making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484 3338. By the way, they are hiring for all positions right now: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, crew members, all their positions. They're hiring. Starting pay is up to $30 per hour based on experience with paid time off and insurance, just to name some of the benefits. Find out more at GannAsphalt.com. Let's go to the mound, Rany. Do you have your starting five locked in already?
Well, I think we have a starting three locked in, like it or not, right? Singer, Greinke, and Jordan Lyles those are guys that are in the rotation. I have it as Daniel Lynch and Brad Keller. That's my guess. Those are the guys that the Royals want to win the jobs.
Okay.
Whether or not they're the best guys. Right? I think Lynch, I certainly want him to win a job. We've been over the Brad Keller thing before. Brad Keller is one of those guys who apparently is getting some new pitching instruction this spring and is throwing a curveball now, and we'll see what happens with that. He's a guy who's had as much success as he has to this point with basically two pitches. So if he has a curveball that is even average, that would completely change who he is as a pitcher. So we will see. But that I assume that's going to be the starting five.
Yeah, I've got one difference. I think the Brad Keller thing, they may be done with him, and there may be a frustration. I don't think they feel a need to try to push, although it's the price that you feel like
that's where
want to get something from him.
That's why I think he has the edge there, just because they're paying him so much.
And you're probably right, but I went with what I want to happen, I guess more so. And I since they are embracing Chris Bubic throwing a slider, Chris Bubic wants the slider. That's the difference I have. Is I have Bubic in the rotation. I do have Keller on this roster, but I go with the three, like you said. Singer, Greinke, Lyles are there, and then I have Lynch and Bubic. I think you want a couple of lefties in there. I think you're a better ball club if you've got a couple of lefties in the rotation. And I'm going to trust that the coaching staff and Bubic can get it worked out, and his slider is a good pitch, and he makes it in the rotation. I think it's going to be an interesting clubhouse if Chris Bubic is sent back to the minor leagues, because I don't see him in the bullpen. I think it's either make the rotation or back to the minors.
I agree with you completely that Bubic would be the guy I want in that role. I will say it would not surprise me if the Royals end up. Hopefully, they won't do a six-man rotation, but a situation where they essentially have six starters, where you have Bubic and Keller both starting at some point. They've got, I mean, between those two and Ryan Yarbrough, who we know will be on the roster, he has a guaranteed contract. They've got a bunch of swing men who can go back and forth from the rotation to the bullpen. It's not a tactic I like to overdo, but the Rays model makes it work. And I strongly suspect that we will be seeing more than five guys making starts for the Royals in April. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you won't get any argument from me. All right, did you enjoy putting together a bullpen?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's a good thing in the sense that, I mean, I didn't have trouble coming up with, 8 guys. Seven if you count Bubic and Keller.
You had tough cuts to make, right?
I kind of did. I mean,
Yes.
there are guys who I think deserve a spot. I'll tell you what, the one thing that really stood out from doing this little mini project today of coming up with the roster is it just underlined for me again how unnecessary it was to sign Jordan Lyles. Because we're sitting here talking about Keller or Bubic. You know what? Both Keller and Bubic, I think I would rather see what they can do in the rotation than a Jordan Lyles. One of them is going to be in the bullpen. You've already got a bunch of guys. Barlow, obviously, making the team. Aroldis Chapman, making the team. Amir Garrett, making the team, unless maybe there's a trade in spring training, which, given their options, wouldn't shock me. Taylor Clark is almost certainly going to make the team. He quietly had a really good year last year. If you just look at his FIP, I mean, he had, what was it? He was the one guy on this bullpen who could actually throw strikes last year. 8 walks and 48 strikeouts in 49 innings. And then Dylan Coleman and Josh Stomont, if they're healthy, have maybe the best stuff of any of the young guys in this organization. So that right there is what, 6 guys, and then Bubic or Keller and Yarbrough. That's 13. I don't have space for Josh Taylor, who they got for Alberto Mondesi and probably be on the roster. I mean, I have to assume at some point in spring training, one of these guys is going to get hurt. Something's going to happen. It's not a bad thing to have an extra guy, but I have no space for Jonathan Heasley. I have no space for Max Castillo. I have no space for Carlos Hernandez. So they're not necessarily great options, but all of these guys at least are guys you want to see pitch with a new pitching, coaching staff in place and see what they can do. And I just feel like Jordan Lyles here just adds to the confusion, and they really didn't need. We talked about bringing him in for competition. I think there's enough competition without spending $17 million on a replacement level guy.
I'll disagree with that. I don't know that I'm not enamored with Jordan Lyles being the guy, but there is not enough competition because enough of Brad Keller and Bubic and Lynch and all these guys. That's not competition when it's just the crew that gets together for ball game, to watch the football game on. I'm done with that. I have no problem with them bringing in another guy and saying you got to beat this guy. Like, he's not even that great, but you got to beat this guy. You got to be consistent enough. So because it's been too much of a, it was, I just missed a couple of spots and all this yada yada afterwards because they knew they were going to make their next start. And I don't think that's there. So I have no problem with the decision to bring Jordan Lyles over. I would like to have seen it be somebody that was even better and somebody that you think could be there for a while, but I'm fine. And I think the idea why he's on a 2-year deal, which again, I don't know that you had to do it, is because they want the competition to remain there. Right. And I think if Jordan Lyles gets beat out, they'll move him, eat money and move him. So I don't mind it as much. I'm going to tell you the part for me, if you want to name that everybody's talking about there, it's Jackson Kowar. And I'll add that name to the list of guys that you did mention because I'm with you.
If he earns it, I would be thrilled. But
I'm with you because I wrote down Heasley, Castillo, Hernandez, all headed to the minor leagues. Richard Lovelady as well.
Mm-hmm.
Going there, and I think though that's tough. I mean there's talent there that has to go down.
And I've even mentioned Jose Cuas, who I really like as a sidearmer, as a different look, and has this stuff to pitch in the major leagues, in my opinion.
And that's the thing is like, how do you fit them all? So I've got, code closers of Barlow and Chapman, and then I've got Coleman and Stomont, and kind of the setup roles. Amir Garrett is on this roster. I've got Keller there. They didn't give him the money to walk away from him. Yarborough wasn't signed to not have a role, and they didn't trade for Josh Taylor to not put him there. So that leaves me with Jackson Coar going down to the minors as well. And he's a guy that, again, they're saying good things. I'm with you. Taylor Clark was their best reliever, but frankly, I mean, tallest, pygmy, I like, yes, he was solid last year, but you should have better than him. And, I expect injuries in this category. And I do think it's going to be interesting to see who they get. And I think it's almost by default, all the young guys lose because they can send them to the minors.
Right.
And
And I think it makes it very easy to set up that shuttle we're talking about, where you extend this to 14 or 15 pitchers by just constantly shuttling guys up and down, using them a lot when they're up, and then they go down to AAA. They have to stay down there for 10 days, and they can rest their arms, which in theory would open up another spot for a hitter. But again, we're having trouble finding 13. So, I mean, again, the roster construction here is a bit of an issue. I really do feel like the hitter pitcher balance is the problem, the fundamental problem with the whole roster that's going to be difficult to manage early in the year.
By the way, I do like this. I've never heard this one before. Prettiest girl on the sidewalk. Okay. Matt says, sounds like the bullpen for the Storm Chasers is going to be pretty good. Yes, it does look that way. I would agree. And I think to your point, in doing this, they are short on hitters. And somebody, whether it's Nick Lofton, I mean, there's a name we didn't mention that maybe should be in the mix.
I don't think he's ready. I think they want him to get 2 or 3 months in AAA.
Agreed.
Although he's shown up with like an extra 15 pounds of muscle. I hear you always hear about the best shape of your life guy, but Nick Lofton, if I had to pick a guy who I'd love to see in that category, Nick Lofton is definitely there because, and he acknowledged that he wore down late last year, which is good to hear because he got to AAA last year and his strikeout rate just shot up. And that was, and Keith Law came on our show and talked about how he was not that concerned about that. He thought he was just worn down. So the fact that he's in much better shape, I don't expect Lofton to break camp, but I mean, he could be an interesting guy by midseason that they could bring him up middle of the year, and he might have accelerated his timetable a little bit.
Yeah, but I did come away saying, okay, I am pleased with the quantity of arms. I mean, the quality, still needs work, but I think the guys that they have, there is some quality in there, but I do think that we should see them moving bullpen pieces for sure. There should be bullpen pieces moved this year. And I think this is a regime that, the transactional type of things, I think they definitely are going to be more transactional. And so whatever you've got here, injuries will certainly come to the bullpen. They always do. And they'll have depth, but, they if they can get quality prospects back, they're going to have plenty of guys that teams want, and teams always need bullpen pieces in a contending year. And I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Like when you look at the 26-man roster, are you excited? Are you ready to go over the win total on the Royals?
I think I am, but it's really just it's a bet on the coaching staff, just whether it's addition by subtraction in terms of just getting rid of coaching that was bringing the pitching staff down. But you really have to bet on the coaching staff because on paper, the pitching staff, you said there's a lot of guys, not a lot of quality. But the assumption is that you can make quality out of quantity because some of those guys are going to advance themselves. The offense, I mean, there's about 2/3 of a lineup here that I think could be a contending lineup in 2 or 3 years. There's still 1/3 that is just between Dozier. We'll see about Franmil Reyes. Like the one for one of the outfield positions is going to be a problem, I think. And then question marks with what they do. If Michael Massey ends up actually hitting, like there are pieces here, but it's still 1 year away from actually being an impressive lineup. So I still see this is, I mean, if everything goes right, a 74 win team maybe, but that's that's actually a fairly rosy scenario. I still think this is closer to like a 68 to 72 win team.
Well, and Matt says, what is the win total in Vegas? I believe it's 69, right? 69,
Well,
69 and a half is what.
This feels like a stay away then.
But it to me, and I'm going to take it over. And I like the way you said, by the way, and I love this one from Nick. When I look at the roster, I'm ready for a stiff drink. Strong reaction there. I like it. I'll take the over because I am going to bet on the coaching staff. I mean, some of these things are simple. I think like a lot that the Royals have done in the past has been overcomplicated. And I believe in those guys that they're going to make everybody a little bit better. And therefore and plus it's hard to get down to where you're chasing 100 losses. I mean, it's really hard. The Royals don't make it look that way.
No, I was going to say the Royals have fooled people into thinking it's quite easy, and it's actually not.
Yeah, they make it look like it's easy, but it's really not. The game of baseball will keep you around if you can pitch it, catch it, and have a couple of base hits here from time to time and hit a ball over the wall every now and then. I am leery to how thin they are in the position players. Right? Like that's it. If they start taking, they're young though, so they should stay fairly healthy.
They are, and again, this is a foundation to build on because the nice thing about the lineup is when you look at the guys who I've considered to be the most important guys, they're all kind of guys who are going to be around for a while. Like the weak spots are also the players, that are 1 year solutions, whether Franmil Reyes hits or not. He technically is actually under contract for 1 more year, but like if Michael Massey hits, you've got a 6-year solution right there. So, whatever MJ Melendez is, he's going to be around for 6 years. And in a year, I think you look at the guys, Michael Garcia, obviously Nick Prado, Drew Waters will come back. Like there's a lot of hitting talent that'll be added to this bunch in a year and not a lot that'll be subtracted. But at the early in the season, they are vulnerable.
Matt said, I have to disagree with you, Sram, which I usually do. I'm terrified that this team is devoid of talent. Vinny Pasquantino's talented. Salvador Perez is talented. Bobby Witt is talented. MJ Melendez is talented. Franmil Reyes, it's one talent, but it's power. He's talented.
That's the best talent.
Brady Singer is talented. Zach Greinke is talented. Daniel Lynch is talented. I don't know if he can harness it or not. Dylan Coleman is talented. Stamon, talented. There is talent on this team. Right? Like, and if it all gets just a little bit better, if it turns out that the coaching has been all wrong and now the coaching is all right, and everybody gets 5% better, this team gets a lot better. And, they're going to use the data, right, across the board. That will be employed, and I don't know, and it was employed more with Mike Matheny certainly than it was the previous regime, but I think it's going to be employed and employed properly, and I think that's going to make a difference for this team. And the depth of the arms makes me think that no, they're not going to be one of the higher scoring teams. But look, I see an organization that went out and hired a bunch of guys from the Rays and the Guardians to play that style of baseball. And when I look at the roster, it's kind of looking like that roster, right? Like the depth of pitching, they didn't stop. Right? Like Jordan Lyles, I get it. Their payroll still isn't huge. So why not create some competition? Not to pick that argument between you and I again, but
we have to have something we disagree on. Sorry.
I don't disagree with you on him being the guy. Just the concept of getting more pitching here. That's what we've asked for. For them to build like the Rays, that this team looks like they're assembling something that looks like the way you did, at least the Rays starter set. And that gives me optimism.
Yeah. I mean, when I say I'm thinking about it more thoroughly now, like I'm probably going to say about 74 wins, but normally like I throw out a number before the season starts. That's like, if everything goes great. Whereas I actually think 74 wins is, like, that's a median forecast. I don't think that doesn't feel optimistic at all, because if the coaching, if I'm right about Cal Eldred and the Royals are right about Brian Sweeney, there is a potential here for a dramatic improvement without an improvement in the underlying players, or I should say, without change in the underlying players. That's exciting to me. That I'm very interested to see what happens. There is certainly a scenario in which this team is a 500-ish team for the first 3 months, and they're 2 games out of a playoff spot come the All-Star break, and then they got some really interesting decisions to make. That that is in play. That is 100% in play. But I just feel like they are about 2 players short of being that right now. They've just got 2 holes, too many holes to fill for me to feel comfortable saying that they're going to be an above 500 team at this point.
All right. Get last thoughts. Most exciting, disappointing. Any final thoughts here?
The one thought, something I thought about when I was putting this together and just talking with you now is, if I had to predict, I'm going to say they're going to trade a reliever between now and opening day, assuming there's not like a bunch of injuries here or whatever. I just feel like the closer you get to spring training with this roster, they're going to realize they're going to be sending 3 or 4 guys down to AAA that they would like to keep around. It could be something like, I think Amir Garrett is a very good candidate because he has a very specific skill set as a hard throwing left-hander in his final year. There will be a market. There won't be a huge market, but there will be a market for Amir Garrett. That would be the most obvious one. You mentioned Taylor Clark as a guy. If he looks like he's going to be squeezed out, they might get something for him, but they're not going to get a lot, certainly. I mean, they didn't give up a lot to get him, so I don't think they're going to have to get a lot. The ballsy move would be to trade Scott Barlow, right? Like, that's because that's something we still think they should have done last summer. I think everybody expects them to do this summer. If you can get a great deal now, I think this you could really kickstart the rebuilding of this team by getting a close to top 100 prospect. You're not probably going to get a top 100, but you might get a top 200 prospect and another guy for Scott Barlow, because you're going to need the roster spot. So that's my prediction right now.
Yeah, I think it's a good one too, because they are deep there, and I think that'll be something they certainly look to do. Hopefully, there's a market out there. Everybody right now kind of thinks like they got their guys, at this point. But my overall takeaway from this was just that, like you, one, they got to get some bats, and I think it'll, to me, it's trade arms for bats down in the system and figure out how to get them coming up to the big leagues and just the overall depth. But I did just come from Arizona. I did just talk to everybody. I did just get their version of why it's going in the right direction and why it's working. And I will fully offer up, Matt was, saying he disagrees with me. I will fully offer up the idea that I'm either not really drinking the Kool-Aid. It's not it. It's just, I liked what I heard. Right. I liked the people that are in charge. I like what I heard. I've liked what I heard from JJ Piccolo. I liked what I heard from Matt Quatrero. I really like the Paul Hoovers and the Sweeneys and even I chatted with Paul Gibson. I liked what I heard there. I'm going to say that if that number's there, the only reason I'm going to go above the, like, I'm working backwards. If 69.5 is the number that Vegas is putting there, I don't see any reason that any major move has been made that would encourage people to bet over. So I'm assuming that they feel like everybody's going to bet the under and that's where they want you. Therefore, I'm going to be on the over. And then I work backwards. Okay, so how do they get to the over? I like what I'm hearing from these guys. I'm going to assume that they're just a much more prepared team and things are getting better. Listen, if they get borderline strikes, if just the pitch framing gets better, I think that does wonders. It's also time for a couple of their young pitchers to turn a corner. And I know that, like, we give up on that in this town because we just haven't seen any starting pitchers actually get developed other than a handful of guys. It's not that hard. And I'm going to assume that they got real people in charge now, and we're going to see real baseball results. And therefore, I like the over. I like the over 69.5 right now.
I'm going to use an expression that you're going to want to reach through your monitor and smack me, but results or not, I actually think I kind of trust the process.
Okay.
Like you said, like the people that are in charge now, right now, they haven't given me any reason not to trust them.
Yes.
And they are definitely doing things differently than they used to. And honestly, for 2023, that's all you and I were asking for back in August of last year.
Right.
So I trust the process, and I'm excited to see what the process is. I haven't even seen it yet, and there will be mistakes, there will be failures, but I actually think there are going to be some successes, and even a couple of successes on the pitching staff this year will be a marked improvement from last year. And that's what you're betting on. You're betting on, regression to the mean, but you're basically betting that they can't possibly be as bad as they were last year.
6-5 Royals, 10-5 Royals, and 8-7 Royals. That's what I'm betting on. I am buying these early spring training wins. I'm not, but
Because like we said, you always trust spring training
that's
results.
right.
The Royals are 3-0, baby.
Yeah, I do like, listen, I like a lot that's out there, and listen, if they're going to play the game, you might as well win it, right? I'm not gonna say go lose the game, but no, there's a lot of a week from tonight. What will their record be? Throw 7 more games onto it. What do you think?
You're asking me to predict 7 spring
Spring
training
training
games.
baseball.
They're going to be 10-0. Sorry.
There you go. So
All right,
that's where
they're
we
going to
sit
be
right
10-0,
now. That's a
and they're going to fall flat on their face in April. It's happened before. The Royals have had the best record in all of baseball in spring training, and I think it was 1999, and then lost 97 games. So there you go.
Yeah, winning is better than losing. Matt
Yeah,
said it best.
always is.
All right, that's going to do it. Remember, if you catch us via the podcast later, we stream live Sunday nights at 10 p.m. normally. Just keep a lookout on our Twitters to see when we're going to go. And, of course, you can catch it at YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch, all the means of streaming video. We've got it. You can catch it there. And, of course, always catch the podcast wherever you get your podcast. So for our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, don't forget any kind of pavement, any kind of parking lot problems you might have, paving and pavement maintenance contractor, they do it all. I've been solving those problems since 1994. And don't forget that they're hiring. You can find all the information you need at GannAsphalt.com. That's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Online at GannAsphalt.com. For Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro, saying thank you very much for joining us here on Kaufman